Well,
As mayor of the city of Stanton, I call the Stanton City Council work session for March 24th, 2022 to order at 5 o'clock. The first item, on March 22nd, 2022, I received a request from Councilor Dole to participate remotely in the March 24th, 2022 Stanton City Council meeting due to a personal matter that prevents her physical attendance at the meeting. Pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, I will now ask Councilor Dole to state the personal matter which makes it unable for her to attend tonight's council meeting. Councilor Dole?
I am out of state. I'm specifically in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina.
All right, sounds nice. All right, I will now entertain a motion to allow Councilor Dole's remote participation in this meeting pursuant to Stanton City Council Procedural Memorandum Number 3.
Madam Mayor,
Vice Mayor Robertson.
pursuant to Stanton City Council Procedural Memorandum Number 3, I move to allow Councilor Dole to remotely participate in the March 24th, 2022 Stanton City Council meeting due to a personal matter.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mayor Oaks, I'll second that.
All right, we have a second from Councilor Darby. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Kessiker, please call the roll.
Mr. Claffey,
Aye.
Ms. Darby,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson,
Aye.
Mayor Oaks.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. I will now ask Councilor Dole to please state the remote location from which she is participating, which you pretty much already did that.
I'm at Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, and I won't be able to use the video part of Zoom because in my meeting with Dr. Stacia, it froze up all the time. So I had to cut out the video and just do audio.
Okay, all right.
This is a true statement.
We're glad that you're here. Could everyone on the city council as well as out in the audience hear Councilor Dole and where she is participating remotely?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Welcome, Councilor Dole. All right, the next item, I would like to take a moment to recognize Chairman Kenneth Venable of the Stanton City School Board.
Kenneth.
Chairman Venable, are there any other school board members that you would like to introduce? Right. Okay, well, welcome, and I'm going to do this to you again at the beginning of the regular meeting. So welcome. All right, the next item is item number 1, a consideration of work session and regular meeting agendas. I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah,
I don't have.
I got it. Madam Mayor,
Councilor Claffey.
I move that we approve the work session and regular meeting agendas as presented.
Right, thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
All right, Vice Mayor Robertson has second. Any further discussion? And hearing none, Mr. Kessiker, please call the roll.
Ms. Darby,
Aye.
Ms. Dole,
Aye.
Mr. Claffey,
Aye.
Mayor Oaks,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. The next item is item 2, a presentation of the proposed FY 2023 budget by the interim city manager. Ms. Beauregard.
Thank you, Mayor Oaks, members of City Council. Kylie, would you like to do the screen? We're going to get our presentation fired up.
All right,
Give us a moment here.
certainly.
That wasn't embarrassing at all. Okay, let's see here. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This is as Mayor Oaks mentioned, the introduction of the city managers or interim city managers proposed budget. And I'm going to stay on this slide for a moment and just talk for a few minutes about this process. And I want to start by acknowledging that this is the first time City Council as a whole group, as a complete body, will be hearing the budget proposal for FY23. And let me bold the word proposal. Beginning tonight starts a process of a series of public meetings and public hearings that will ultimately result in a final budget that will be considered for council adoption on April 28th. So this is the first step in a series of steps. So let me talk about the schools for a moment. There is no argument that a successful and thriving school system is critical to the success of the city. And there's no doubt we all want to expand on that success and excellence. As everyone is well aware, the schools have been a topic of much discussion in the recent weeks. We recognize that the school board is asking for more funds that are in this proposed budget, and we are committed to work through those budget gaps and differences. But I first want to take a moment to address how I think we got to this point. Again, this is the city manager's proposed budget, and a city budget takes months to put together. It is complicated and takes a lot of discussion, work, and collaboration. It is not something that's done overnight. This is important when clarifying the current proposed local contribution to the city schools, because city and school administration actually started meeting this past November to talk about our budget issues and challenges. We talked about a lot of ideas on how to tell our story together, which in the end, unfortunately, did not happen. But for next year, that is certainly something we can strive to do together. But regardless, in early January, we first broached the FY23 50-50 formula with them and suggested changes that differed from past practice. The schools advocated for the 50-50 formula throughout last year's process and again on January 27th of this year during the joint City Council School Board work session. At that work session, the schools advocated strongly for the 50-50 formula, which equated to about $1.28 million in new money. At the next budget work session, this one with just City Council on February 2nd, we still worked on the assumption that the figure we heard the previous week was the school's request. No new information was presented at that time. Following that work session, though, I asked our CFO to recalculate the school's number as requested by the schools at the January 27th work session, essentially going back to the spirit of the 50-50 formula. He did that, and we continued to work to balance our budget. At the end of February, I met with school administration and shared with them what we thought we could do in the proposed budget as far as a number. The number I provided was based on the 50-50 formula, reflective of updated revenue estimates, and was consistent with the practice of considering the total financial picture of the city, which we revealed had indeed been the case for the last 20 years at least. You will see that slide again later tonight. In other words, it's the 50-50 formula, plus or minus, depending on those factors. The following week in early March, I learned that the school's ask was actually $1.396 million. I was not sure the formula would support that, and I expressed my concern to school administration. I had already scheduled individual sessions with you all to brief you on the budget proposal and to get your input. It was at those meetings that I informed each of you of that revised ask. And we talked about it, but what I heard was that those issues could be worked out during the budget process, which we're beginning tonight, and that we would move forward with what we already had. It was on March 10th, 2 weeks ago tonight, in a meeting with the mayor, myself, the school board chair, and the superintendent that we first learned of the $1.68 million ask. At that point, I'd already conducted individual briefings with you all, and frankly, we had run out of time to make further major adjustments. That was a major adjustment to the budget proposal, frankly, without your input. There was simply no time to figure out what to do with that ask, and it would have been inappropriate for me to make assumptions as to how you would want to move forward. This felt different, and I believe deserved a discussion with you as a group. And again, that starts tonight. As we enter these discussions, there's over a $624,000 difference between the school's most recent ask and the city's local contribution to the schools in the current proposed budget. In my many years of experience working on local government budgets, this, while not ideal or comfortable, is not an unusual situation to be in. A locality and school system often don't agree at first, but differences are resolved during the budget process where they can be discussed in public with complete transparency so that everyone understands the decisions at hand, the benefits and consequences of those decisions. I trust and believe in that process, this process, to get us through this together. And with that, I would like to start walking you through my proposed budget. For the next fiscal year 23, which begins on July 1st, we have a total budget for all funds of almost 142.3 million, excuse me. That's an 11.79 million increase over 22 or 9%. The general fund is 65.2 million or 3.4 million more than FY22. And again, the general fund is what people think of when they think of city services, is where police and fire are funded, public works, parks and recreation. So when you think of the services that citizens receive, it comes out of the general fund for the most part. There's several significant themes in this budget, and I'll just walk through these quickly. This budget is intended to demonstrate prudence and stability, and it's critical to maintain our strong financial foundation and to focus on long-term financial health, but still be adaptable with our decision-making and agile in all our actions. I think this budget focuses on aspiration and goals. And given the unknowns at this time and the many uncertainties that we all face in our own lives with increased inflation, workforce shortages, the prices of goods, we need to focus on these important principles. City staff and departments have shown dedication and determination in fulfilling citizen needs, requests, and wants. And for that reason, this budget keeps stability in providing city services and recognizes their efforts. As a community, we need to have in place excellent, well-funded city services that address the needs of everyone. We have to thrive in all that we do. One cannot be without the other. Because of the Great Resignation and several other circumstances, we are not only competing with other local government, but the private sector as well to attract and retain a quality workforce, which is why this budget takes big steps in the areas of salaries that I will address later. Next, after 2 years of a health pandemic, followed by shutdowns, devastating floods, and now increasing inflation rates and economic uncertainty, the quality of life for the people of Stanton has been changed and influenced. However, during these historic times, the people of Stanton have shown tremendous patience, kindness, and a pulling together spirit. So we have to continue to be mindful of what our citizens are going through right now. And I think this budget does that as well. And this budget does provide additional funds to support Stanton City Schools. And although we have some work yet to do in this area, I will repeat our commitment to working through differences. And I'm excited to think how we can together aspire for a future that includes more collaboration and discussions earlier in the budget process, that includes sharing our challenges and successes on a continuous basis. I'd just like to draw attention on this slide to the Stanton Plan, or your strategic plan that you adopted, that you had a retreat on last August and adopted in October. And you'll see various parts in the budget where we refer or align activities with that plan. So this is also at the forefront of our mind as we put this budget together. So what is new? I mentioned earlier that we're taking big steps to right-size salaries for city employees, and I'll talk more about that shortly. We're allocating for improvements to the centralized recycling center, which I'll also talk about. We're adding a couple of new positions. We're continuing our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and we're providing some funds to enhance and be proactive in our communications engagement. And finally, because this has been a big topic lately, and I want to recognize it, we're providing additional funds to the Shenandoah Animal Services Center to help stabilize and improve shelter operations. And I'll go over all these in a little bit. I'm just going to get into some charts here. So these are total revenues, all funds, the 142.9 million. And I know these might be hard to read. But the biggest part of the pie, well, there's several large parts of the pie. One is the state funds and the other part is general property taxes. More importantly, though, is when you start talking about the general fund, which general property taxes are 43.7% of revenues, with other local taxes following at 26.4%. And you can see the breakdown of the dollars on the right-hand side there. And of the general property taxes, real estate makes up the biggest portion of that. Speaking of real estate, this budget keeps the real estate tax rate as 92 cents per $100 assessed value. This is an off assessment year, so the only growth is new construction. Mr. Trayer will talk about the environmental fund fees a little bit later, but we are proposing a 15% increase. If you remember last fiscal or the fiscal year that we're in now, there was no increase. These are driven mainly by capital needs at the regional landfill. And here's the monthly impact, $3.13 a month, or an annual impact of $37.56. And he will talk more about that when we get to that presentation at the regular meeting. Let me just talk a minute about how we develop city revenues. We actually have a team of staff that look at all the revenues together. And that includes myself, the Chief Finance Officer, Commissioner of Revenue, and the City Treasurer. We review revenues line item by line item, making projections on historical and currently trending amounts. And in addition, we even discuss potential adjustments due to more recent trends, like we're seeing now, future known changes, and highlighted possible uncertainties. All of these factors influence the projections in this proposed budget. So as far as other local taxes go, you can see here that the projections for sales tax are increasing by over $612,000. Transient occupancy, which has struggled because of the COVID pandemic, is finally going up again by $208,000 we're projecting. Meals tax revenue increasing by 1.1 million, and BPOL, which is the business license tax, by 210,000. State and federal funding are smaller pieces of the pie at $403,000 and $217,000 respectively, mainly to fund health and welfare programs, constitutional officers, and grant funding. As far as total expenditures, here's the breakout of total expenditures for all funds. The biggest part of this is personal services, which are employees. On this slide, this is total general fund expenditures. And I just want to make a note about something. That transfer to the education fund is the largest single expenditure of the general fund. And I'll just note that public safety, albeit very similar to education, is made up of actually several departments such as police and fire. Those are the largest city budgets in that functional area. Outside agencies such as the jail, juvenile detention center, and the animal shelter, along with building inspections. And then you see the other smaller pieces of the pie as well. So let me talk a little bit about our personnel and what we're doing in FY23 as far as salaries. So effective October 1st, 2022, we're proposing a 5% cost of living increase for all full and part-time city employees. Let me back up a minute. We really put a lot of thought into what we would be doing in terms of salaries for our employees. We think a lot of these changes and increases are long overdue. Like any other industry right now, we're having trouble finding a proficient workforce, recruiting people, keeping people. And that's a strong priority in this budget. And I spoke about the Great Resignation that's making it much more difficult and more challenging to provide city services in a way that we want to do so. So in terms of the 5% cost of living increase, on the other hand, I'm proposing that department heads receive a 2.5% increase. And we propose this differential pay in order to demonstrate and bolster our commitment to employees who need it the most. And once this budget is approved, we will then work with Human Resources to contract out for a pay and compensation study, which we've not done in some time. And that will help us gather important information and data to help ensure in the future that we have internal pay equity and external competitiveness. There are 2 full-time positions that I will talk about later in this message, but just briefly, I'll mention that one is a housing planner grants coordinator, which is funded 100% by HUD funds. And the second is a Parks and Recreation position, but I'll come back to those. When we get into public safety, this is the most, what we propose for fire and police, to our memory, has never been done. The compensation for fire, which will be effective July 1st, is a 2% plus 5% COLA for a 7% total increase. So starting pay will increase from $37,889 to $40,000. And then on top of that, we're adding certification compensation. Now, that certification compensation depends on what certification you get. There's master firefighter, which adds another 3%, technical rescue team, which is a max of 2,500, fire inspector also 2,500, and hazmat another 2,500. So we're hoping that by offering this increase and these certification compensations, that we encourage firefighters to achieve maximum certification and encourage staff to stay with the city of Stanton and make the city more attractive to potential employees. And while current turnover rate in fire and rescue is very low right now, we are planning for several retirements to occur in the next 4 years. With this compensation package, we become more attractive and competitive within and outside the region. As far as the police department, adjustments are being proposed to address higher entry-level wages and turnover rate in law enforcement, both locally, regionally, and statewide, as well as compression issues that have occurred as a result of periodic entry pay adjustments that have impacted senior personnel pay. Some of this is fueled by a national anti-police sentiment and the Great Resignation that I spoke about earlier. Stanton has not been immune to a larger percentage of younger officers leaving the field altogether. This turnover is costly and inefficient and clearly detrimental to the overall effectiveness of the department. And you can see here that effective July 1st, we're proposing a 5% COLA plus varied increases to address compression. Starting pay will go from $40,000 to $44,100. The last group of salary adjustments is for library, information technology, parks and recreation, and golf. These are to address compression, increase minimum wages, and align wages across the organization for similar jobs. Under education, I'll repeat one more time what I've said earlier. We all want a successful and thriving school system. And again, we recognize the school board is asking for additional dollars than what we have in this budget, which right now is a transfer totaling $14.7 million, which equals 22.5% of the city's general fund budget. The city's contribution in the proposed budget is $624,000 less than what's included in the school board's adopted budget. And one item I just wanted to pull out is that I wanted to talk a little bit about outstanding general fund debt service for schools, because I think this is an important point, that the city is incredibly proud to have a new high school and was proud to be able to make the financials work for this. In my career, I have never seen this happen. We've always talked about a new high school, but where I worked, it never happened. So the community should be extremely proud of that, and I know we are. But it is a cost, and it should be recognized as one that is a significant contribution to the schools. And we pay for this debt from the exact same pool of local revenues that we pay for our local share to the schools for their operations. Next is so I'm going to go into some functional areas now. Next is public safety. They have an increase of 1.62 million. And this is major drivers include the compensation package I spoke about earlier. Middle River Regional Jail at $307,000 increase. The Juvenile Center at $105,000 increase. And I'll come back to the Animal Services Center in a minute. Also healthcare and retirement costs and the city's share of the SAW Regional Range and the Regional CIT Coordinator. So the number that's in this budget for the Animal Services Center fully funds the request as of now. It includes increases in salaries for current staff, the addition of new personnel, and recognizes increases in maintenance and vet costs. And all of this, again, is meant to help stabilize the shelter and improve operations. Now, I do have a caveat that on March 14th at the owners meeting, we received a revised budget estimate. So any adjustments that need to be made will be reviewed, and the difference is only about $19,000. But I just wanted to point that out. So. Under health and welfare, the increase is $263,000. And again, this is mostly driven by our share of the Shenandoah Valley Social Services, which is a 25.83% share of total cost. And then there were also increases to the city share of the Central Shenandoah Health District and the Valley Community Services Board. Under community development, the increase is $555,000. Again, this is reflective of the October 1st, 2022 salary increases, healthcare and retirement cost. There's an additional almost $71,000 to reflect the 1% tax for tourism agreement, and an additional $357,000 for the economic development agreements. And this is where we have one of the positions, the housing planner grants coordinator, And this position will manage the city's U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Entitlement Program, as well as other grant associated activities that serve low-income families with issues related to affordable housing, public infrastructure, and social services. Just to talk about a few things this position could lead, such as assist in formulating operational procedures and recommending general housing policies, reviewing professional and technical housing-related activities and coordinates and programs within the office and other agencies, and engaging with local agencies to help prepare their plans that will meet HUD CDBG guidelines. That's just a taste of what this position will do. Again, this position is 100% funded by the HUD grant. Under general government, the increase is $720,000. Again, this is reflective of the October 1st, 2022 salary increases, healthcare and retirement cost. I'll try to explain this. Some part of this is, if you recall, in FY22, we budgeted a negative contingency of $293,000. That was at the end of the budget discussions, towards the end when we were adopting the budget. That's not in there, so we had to find that money. So that's why the 720 is such a large increase, because 294,000 of that is a negative contingency that we didn't budget for this current fiscal year for 23. The voting registrar is also going to receive additional voting software and equipment for the registrar. In the box there, you can see that we're going to continue our Equity and Diversity Commission work. I've budgeted $20,000. If you remember, we have a grant of $25,000 working with the Virginia Risk Sharing Association. When that grant expires, I would like for the commission to have a budget to continue their work. We're going to again contract with the Polko platform for a community-wide survey, an employee survey, and other engagement. Again, we used Polko to do our ARPA survey. They were used to do Shop and Dine Out in Downtown survey. And there's many other applications for this platform that we're excited to be able to use. We also have a new technology solution for targeted messages delivered via email and SMS. And its goal is to increase subscribers, segment audiences, and schedule campaigns to maximize community engagement. And then finally, there are dedicated funds for Citizen University, which will be picked up again, and special events, engagement opportunities as determined. Under Public Works, the major drivers are the October 1st, 2022 salary increases, healthcare and retirement costs, and full year of salary increases granted in FY 2022 to Public Works staff. I'd like to talk a little bit about the recycling center, and even though this is in the environmental fund, it's not in the general fund. I do look to talk about it because I know we'll be discussing it during our work sessions. This budget maintains the centralized recycling center concept and makes incremental changes to the operations in order to find the best balance of efficiency and effectiveness. So as far as ground level collection, for anybody who uses the center, you may have noticed that we actually have dumpsters now for mixed paper, which is very exciting. It's much easier to get it into the dumpster than it is to get it into the, it's more ground level. Let me put it that way. It's good for people that don't have the heights to put it up over their heads. We'll soon do the same for aluminum and metal cans. And if we can, we'll do it for plastic. So ground level makes recycling easier for both customers and our attendants, and they can also be secured. So that's an exciting change to the recycling center as well. As far as hours, our ability to reliably operate extended hours is a function of labor, frankly, and we're working hard to improve our labor supply and reducing our labor demand by increasing efficiency, which I just spoke about. As soon as we feel we can reliably support extended hours, we will add one or more late days for citizens who cannot recycle during normal working hours. And then we also might think about lighting, but that gets me to my next point, which is location. Gypsy Hill Park is not an ideal location. On the plus side, it is centrally located, well-known, and has adequate space. The downside is that it interferes with routine park events such as high school and youth football and Happy Birthday America. In that case, it will have to be entirely dismantled. It's also a frequent target of vandalism and extremist foot traffic. An ideal location would either be dedicated to recycling or co-located with more compatible uses. Wherever it's located, it should be easy to find and accommodate traffic flow. Right now, we're looking into that, trying to figure out what city property might fit that bill, but I know we will be actively seeking a more permanent location for the centralized recycling center in the near future. Under Recreation, Parks, and Library, the increase is almost $300,000. The drivers include an October 1st, 2022 salary increase, healthcare and retirement costs. There were other targeted salary adjustments to be made to address compression and increase minimum wages, additional part-time help at the golf course. And finally, we have one new agency, the Virginia Cooperative Extension of Augusta County 4-H program. And in this budget, we are proposing to fund half of their ask at $2,673. What I found out is that even without city funding, the cooperative extension currently serves 85 youth in Stanton City schools and hosts city youth at their 4-H camps. This new funding would offset these costs and expand these programs so that they are able to serve and provide programming to hundreds of city youth in the areas of cooking, agriculture, natural resources, public speaking, leadership, and STEM curriculum. And second, here's our other new position, is a park maintenance position that will perform general maintenance and care of our parks and recreational areas. And this is mainly in response to a need that was previously filled by a heavy usage of inmate labor. Once that stopped as a result of the health pandemic, the city found itself unable to keep up with the needs in our parks and recreational areas. This position will address those needs, and while we can still utilize inmate labor on a supplemental basis, we will not be relying on that as heavily as has been done in the past. Jumping right into the capital improvement plan, which you all have seen, $13.5 million. This was approved by City Council on February 10th, 2022. You can see here that there's funds from the FY 2022 budget amendment of $3.3 million and 8.7 from the Virginia Department of Transportation for the Stanton Crossing Road extension. So the next slide I listed, but I'm going to talk in a minute about how we balance the budget. And unfortunately, due to the demands of the 23 budget, the general fund transfer to CIP reserves has been eliminated. So funding consideration of these reserves will occur during the year-end fund balance review. So speaking of budget balancing, I'll just say that budgets are all about choices. And Stanton's budget process begins with the submittal of each department's budget request in December. Departments determine what resources they need to deliver quality services as efficiently as possible. And each director has to justify the submitted budget request during budget review discussions. But ultimately, difficult decisions are made to balance the budget based on an understanding of City Council's priorities and sound financial and management principles. And frankly, what can we afford to do? So on this sheet, you'll see that we have eliminated the CIP reserves, which is the 1.3 million, which is the first bullet. There's a reduction in the transfer to the debt service fund to 400,000. New department requests that remain unfunded are almost 399,000 in new positions and over 900,000 in operational expenses. And then this budget uses fund balance and health reserves of just over $1 million to help balance the budget. So that being said, we had a lot of accomplishments this past year, and then these are just a few that I'm going to touch on. I'll highlight 3 grants that the city received for economic development efforts and in the downtown area. The first was an $850,000 Virginia Business Ready Site Program grant for Stanton Crossing. The second is a $50,000 Virginia Brownfield grants for the Arcadia project. And the third was a $300,000 EPA Brownfield Assessment Grant for the West End, all very exciting. And you'll hear about one more grant tonight, which is also very exciting in my comments at the end of the regular meeting. As far as the Richmond Avenue corridor, we've got many new places to eat and take our vehicles for oil changes and get auto parts, including Chipotle, Jersey Mike's Subs, Take 5 Oil Change, and O'Reilly Auto Parts. Closer to home, right downtown here, Ciders from Mars, Seed to Tail, which is up the road on Augusta Street, the Foundry, Magdalena's, and Crumble. So you can get everything you need within walking distance. And then very exciting, and we'll be talking about this later too, is the completion of the Central Avenue Streetscape Improvement Project. Second page of accomplishments. I talked a little bit about the HUD, the housing planner earlier. So this is our third year as a HUD entitlement community. And we received $339,000 in CDBG HUD funds to fulfill that mission. And then finally, there's two, I think they're a big deal. I'm a budget person though, so I would think that. A GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the FY22 adopted budget, and a GFOA Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, lots of words here, for FY21 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. I got a lot of the finance department sitting behind me, so they all deserve all the credit for that, for those two awards. Finally, I want to thank everybody who's helped in this room. We have a lot of department heads and staff in this room. I want to thank the entire finance team. A lot of thanks to Phil Traer, who has put up with me quite a bit, actually. So I really appreciate what he's done. But we have an incredible team of directors and staff in the city departments to help put this together. None of this is possible without them. So I appreciate all the time and commitment and passion they take to serve the Stanton community. So in closing, I really believe that this 2023 proposed budget keeps the entire Stanton community in focus and in mind. But I'm excited to work with City Council. We're excited to work with City Council developing the adopted budget for the next month. But I think this is a good start. So this is my last slide, and then I'll introduce Mr. Traer to talk about his slides. The 23 budget material are online at this website. The budget website is under the finance department actually, but you can find it here, ci.stanton.va.us/budget. I think everybody knows how to contact City Council, so I'm not going to repeat that. Public meetings and work sessions happen on April 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, which is when the City Council is scheduled to adopt the budget. And on April 14th, there will be two public hearings, one on the proposed budget and a second one on the environmental fund fee changes. Both of those ordinances are in your packet to have an introduction this evening. So there's no action you will take tonight on either of those. It's just the introduction, and Mr. Traer will walk you through those later. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Traer for his portion of this presentation.
Are there any questions by council members? If not, then we'll move on to Mr. Traer. Thank you, Ms. Beauregard.
Thank you. Let me get his slides up.
Sure, it might be there somewhere.
Okay, Madam Mayor, members of council, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Tonight, we have an opportunity to provide some clarity to much of the information surrounding our most recent pandemic budgets, as well as the FY 2023 proposed post-pandemic budget. Some of the slides being used this evening will look familiar as they've been used at prior council meetings. On slide 2, as we all know, in March 2020, the governor shut down all but essential businesses. The economic implications of this event were immediately recognized. In reaction to this event, the city manager immediately implemented steps to reduce expenditures for the remainder of 2020. Steps included the freezing of all vacant positions with limited exceptions, the elimination of all unnecessary non-compensation expenditures, deferral of all CIP projects, delayed summer park programs and services, and we've involuntarily terminated all part-time positions who were unable to work their shifts. In slide 3, it's a slide that was presented to council in April 2020, summarizes the projected savings for the remainder of 2020 for items 1 and 2 referenced above. As can be seen, these two action items represented $1.5 million in savings for the balance of 2020. Slide 4, also presented to council in April 2020, outlines the balance of the projected savings. Deferral of CIP projects, 1.4, delayed opening of summer park activities, 45, and the involuntary termination, $75,000, total savings, $3 million. Slide 5 summarizes the action we took to modify our FY 2021 budget. Going back to March 2020, city staff had already prepared the 2021 budget document and was within a week of presentation when the governor's shutdown occurred. Having been involved in budgeting in both public and private sector for over 30 years, this was a scenario that none of us had ever faced. Our undesignated fund balance in March 2020 equaled 1.1 million, and our safety net reserve of 15.5% equaled 8.7 million, which amounted to less than 2 months of operating reserves. Our safety net reserve policy specifically states that these funds are only to be used in events of natural disasters and not to be used to buffer the effects of economic downturn. Given the uncertainty of the length of the shutdown, the economic effects of these shutdowns, we proceeded in a conservative manner. Revenue shortfalls to our original budget were projected downwards and were closely aligned with Jim Regenball's statewide estimates, which many of Virginia's localities used as well. Where Stanton differed from our neighbors that we did not immediately dip into our reserves, but rather we made cuts first in an attempt to ensure long-term continuity of city services and to ensure that every full-time employee remained employed. To put this on a more personal basis, very few people in this room who, if they were to lose their job, would immediately draw down their savings and continue to spend as usual. Instead, most people would curb their expenses in an attempt to weather the storm, the economic storm that had befallen upon them. And this is what we did. In response to the pandemic, our FY21 budget was revised within 30 days. We eliminated 2% salary increase scheduled for January 1st. We reduced the local transfer to schools as per the traditional revenue share formula. Original estimate was 1.7, later revised to 1.8. Deferral 21 CIP expenses for $941,000. Reduction of non-compensation and part-time labor, $434,000. Reductions due to personnel actions, $944,000. In contrast, the schools were in a position to budget $703,000 in federal awards, which were awarded to them to offset the effects of the pandemic. In addition, schools budgeted to draw down their fund balance by $750,000, an amount that they would ultimately not use. In the end, school staff did not receive a previous scheduled COLA, but staffing levels did remain intact throughout the school closures and no furloughs or wage adjustments took place. Total year-on-year revenue variance for the schools was negative $1 million. Slide 6, also a reprint from our April 2020 presentation, outlines the makeup of the city's $944,000 personnel action reduction summarized above. As you can see, every single department had a combination of frozen positions and or up to 10 furlough days applied to their budgets. All of these reductions were factored into each of the city's departmental budgets. The difference between the school's approach and the city's approach is the school supplemented their budget with a federal grant and reserves while the city reduced staff compensation and part-time position. As FY 2021 unfolded, the schools need only to not draw down on their reserves, while the cities required additional appropriations in order to offset the staff reductions built into their budgets. Slide 7, we begin to address the discrepancy between the cuts paid to the city's operating departments and the year-on-year expense summary, which seems to offer a different story. Total year-on-year expense summary shows the city reducing its expenditures by $2.9 million, most of which was a result of the reductions to the transfer to the education and CIP fund. The bottom half of the slide breaks out the effects of the transfers, and when we do, we arrive at the 253. This was highlighted by the schools and reported by local reporters. So why the disconnect? Slide 8 shows the effect of state mandates and outside agencies, primarily the regional jail, had on our 2021 budget. This is year-on-year expense differential between 2020's budget and 2021's budget. For the most part, these costs are not a part of our normal operating departments. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office is a constitutional officer department, and we have little to no control over the state mandates within this department. That said, we will start with the Commonwealth Attorney, which increases expenditures by $193,000 over the previous year. These additional costs were mandated by the state, and for which the state did provide some additional revenue to cover 65% of these costs. The additional revenues amounted to $124,000. Next, we have outside agency year-on-year cost increases, which have been entirely absorbed by the city. Juvenile detention, $10,000, Middle River Regional Jail, $450,000, Office of Youth, $8,000. Next, Children's Service Act, $50,000, primarily pass-through. Department of Social Services, $257,000, primarily pass-through. And we have year-on-year increases in economic development agreement costs of $367,000. These are costs associated with several developments in the city, and they are obligations of the city which must be honored. This item is recognized by both the city and the schools as a carve-out to year-on-year resource allocations. To be clear, this $367,000 in actual is the actual difference between FY 2020's budgeted expense and FY 2020's actual expense. Had this been budgeted properly, the budgeted school transfer would have been 13.6 as opposed to the high water mark of 13.8 million. To cite only a $250,000 year-on-year decrease in operating departmental expenses without properly putting into context the nature of the state mandates and outside agency costs, which we have very little control over, is very misleading. Stanton City operating departments were all reduced by various expense reductions, primarily through furloughs and freezing of open positions. While furloughs were lifted during the course of the year, most positions frozen early on in the budget process remained frozen for the majority of the year. The outside agency costs, CSA, and social service expense are not operating departments within the city, but rather outside obligations of the city. The city's operating departments have been impacted by these rising outside agency costs as they've had to absorb the impact of the costs via reductions to their own operating departments in areas of non-compensation requests and deferred cost of living increases. All the costs listed on the slides are included in the net 250. These costs do not go away, they only mount. Slide 9 addresses a couple points when producing a cost per pupil variance in Waynesboro. A part of the Waynesboro calculation takes into consideration resources used to fund the debt service for their new high school. When differences in the support is calculated, when using the school's methodology, the reported 2022 per pupil support is reduced by $383 per student. This figure takes into consideration the new high school debt and the additional capacity the city is building for its future construction. The second point is the city pays for 100% of the staff assigned to perform the school's accounting function. The city pays for 100% of the school's accounts payable, procurement, payroll, audit preparation, and state reporting tasks. We estimate this value to be nearly $300,000. When this is factored, we see the gap closing by an additional $109 per student. Based upon Stan's projected 2023 increase of $1.1 million in local transfer, we feel the gap may close even further. On slide 10, we address the revenue discrepancy between the city and schools between 2021 and 2022. As can be seen on the slide, the year-on-year revenue variance for the city and schools is 5.4 and 2.8 million respectively. Account for both organizations' year-on-year variance of fund balance use. Take that into consideration. You back out the incremental amount the city's 5.5 of the city's 5.4 million year-on-year revenue variance that was forwarded to the schools, and you back out the year-on-year economic cost developments, you have a variance in favor of the schools of $589,000. Slide 11, we perform the same calculation between 22 and 23. As can be seen on this slide, the year-on-year revenue variance of the city and schools is 3.4 and 2.7 respectively. Back out both organizations' year-on-year use of fund balances and reserves. Back out the incremental amount of the city's 3.4 million year-on-year variance that was forwarded to the schools and the year-on-year economic development costs. You have a variance which slightly favors the city by $29,000. Slide 12 is a familiar format as we've used this format multiple times in the past 3 years. Slide 12 outlines uncontrollable increases the city's had to absorb over the last 3 budget cycles. Leading the way is the Middle River Regional Jail with $1.1 million in additional budgeted expenditures. Since 2020, the city's had to absorb 3.6 million in uncontrollable expenditures before school transfer and cost of living appropriations for city staff is considered. We recognize the schools have had their own challenges in the area of VRS and health insurance, but this is our picture. Slide 13, when we calculate the overall revenue variance between the city and schools between FY 2020 and 2023. As can be seen in this slide, the 3-year revenue variance of city and schools is 5.9 and 4.27 respectively. Again, back out both organizations' year-on-year use of fund balance and reserves, back out the incremental amount of the city's $5.9 million revenue variance that was actually forward to the schools, and we back out the year versus year economic development cost differences, and we have a variance which favors the schools by $229,000. Slide 14, we review some budgetary highlights of the last 2 budget cycles of FY 22 and 23. New position, schools 26, city -3. -3 because we had to freeze positions in order to help fund wage adjustments for public works staff. General wage increases, schools 11%, city 8%. Bonus provision, schools $269,000, city 0. Use of fund balance and reserves, schools $944,000, city $2.2 million. Negative contingency, schools 0, city $293,000. Employee portion of health insurance increases, schools 9%, city 14%. It is this slide that really tells the tales of the effects of the costs outlined in slide 12. Our city departments are having to absorb those costs, and it is affecting their budget. It is affecting their wage increases. It is affecting their staffing levels. Slide 15 and 16. Slides 15 and 16 are being shown again this evening to address the reported assumptions of why city staff presented these slides to council on February 2nd, 2023. Up until the February meeting, the assumption had been that the city and schools split evenly the year-on-year increases in local revenue. In fact, school staff reported at the January 27, 2022 meeting that the only time the city had deviated from the 50-50 formula was in the 2021 and 2022 budget cycles. A review of the last 20 years indicated that in reality, the city has always taken into consideration the overall financial picture when allocating additional resources. As I reported at the February budget work session, over the last 20 years, adjustments of some sort was applied to 17 of the last 20 years. I'm told that the recent variances were made up to provide capacity for the new high school. The point of this slide was to demonstrate that perception and reality have historically been at odds. To be clear, this slide was not added to suggest that this is the way it's always been done, so let's continue, but rather we presented these slides to correct information reported at the January 27, 2022 joint meeting. I believe the city and the schools both agree that it's time for a new methodology. Slide 17 reviews the fund balance history of the school since 2016. As you can see, the school's fund balance has not been decimated. In fact, it's at a record high. FY 2021's budget use of $750,000 in fund balance actually turned into an increase of $1.5 million for a positive budget versus actual variance of $2.25 million. The schools are currently dealing with 21 vacancies. Given this, in all likelihood, the schools in FY 2022 will finish with yet another record fund balance level. In FY 2021, the schools were shut down for a significant portion of the year. And offsetting the reductions in local transfers, the schools did receive upwards of $10 million in assistance during the course of FY 2021. $1.6 million of this came from the city when it allocated a portion of its CARES funding. Stanton shared its allocation well before any of our neighbors, and to my knowledge, at a much higher percentage. Throughout 2021, staff monitored the school statement and felt comfortable the schools were not in a position where they'd have to dip into their fund balance. As highlighted by the schools, the city also had a record undesignated fund balance at the end of 2021 in the amount of nearly $9.2 million. As per policy, our first consideration is to apply these funds to CIP projects. Projects such as School warehouse and a portion of the emergency radio project were cash funded to avoid saddling citizens with the additional long-term debt obligations. Earlier this year, council appropriated 2.5 of its fund balance of that $9.2 million fund balance to the city CIP for future school construction projects. School administration has already communicated to the mayor that they will be seeking an additional $2.5 million on top of what's already been appropriated for their current planned construction projects. Slide 18 provides a possible path for the schools to close a majority of the funding gap without eliminating any positions or utilizing any fund balance, any additional fund balance. We start with several reimbursement lines, which we feel the schools have budgeting opportunities. Perkins Federal Grant, $68,000. Title II, $90,000. SOP administration fees, $100,000. Medicaid, $63,000. Total revenue opportunities, $322,000. Next, we have VRS rate savings between the use of the professional and non-professional position classifications. We quantify this savings to be $82,000 for the trades and maintenance positions. The VRS rates for these positions are lower than what is budgeted, and $67,000 for transportation positions, which are not eligible for VRS. These total $149,000. After accounting for these adjustments, we believe the funding gap will be lowered from $624,000 to $152,000.
I'm going to break in here for a minute. That 152,000 I can find tonight. We can identify that tonight and be balanced.
Slide 18. On this, our last slide, I want everyone in the room to walk away knowing that both the city and school staff agree it's time for a new methodology. Last week, city and school staff briefly discussed alternative methods for school allocation. One alternative, a model similar to Waynesboro, is where a factor is applied to the actual revenues as reported in the most recent audited statements. This will remove subjectivity from the process and allow for the early certainty of the transfer to for the schools and their budgeting process. To implement such a program, we would need to baseline back to FY 2020's budget transfer percentage and work forward. That completes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions by council members?
I have a question.
Councilor Claffey, I'm sorry.
Hi, Steve.
Hello. You're going to pay for that one.
I know I am. Your hair's gotten so long.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Councilor Darby.
Okay. Mr. Traer, can you go back to slide 17 for me?
Yes, ma'am.
And just, can you go through that? Yeah, that one again.
Okay.
Help me understand.
Yes. That's the history of the fund balance, the school's fund balance since 2016. As you can see, between 2016 and 2017, they actually utilized 2.7% of their fund balance, $36,000. Between 17-18, their fund balance rose by 727, by 35.9%. I'm not doing this simple math in my mind. Next, we increased our fund balance by, we reduced the fund balance by 4.2%. And then in FY20, it jumped up to 3.1 million. And then in 2021, it jumped up another 47% to $4.6 million. This is a record high for the schools. It's been previously reported that their fund balance has been decimated. Actually, it's been quite the opposite. Currently in FY 2022, they have a fund balance budgeted for $223,000. We're anticipating that they're going to have funds left over in excess of $1 million. So they'll be increasing their fund balance. They had 21 vacant positions as reported last week, I believe, or earlier this week. I think they're in good with 9 weeks to go before the school year ends for the children. I think they're in awfully good shape to increase their fund balance at the end of 2022.
And just remind me, back in January, how much we gave money back in January out of our fund balance.
We did. We did. We gave 2.5 million out of our fund balance to cash fund school construction projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, CIP.
Wait a second. You done?
Yes.
Okay. Vice Mayor
And
Robertson.
then Phil, remind me, I know that you and I had a small conversation. We increased, and it sounds like we may be able to find more. But over last year, we increased by what, 1,070,000?
73,000, yeah, and it's a high water mark by $850,000. FY 2020 was a high water mark. I will mention again, FY 2020's budgeted economic development agreement costs were not budgeted correctly, not by a long shot. They were off by $367,000. Half of that, in effect, would have affected the school transfer that year. And had that been budgeted properly, the high water mark would have been 13.6 million. The difference between the city's 9.2 undesignated fund balance at the end of 21 and the schools is $4.6 million. Half of that is 2.3. We moved 2.5 to the city for their future construction projects. And I mentioned as part of that presentation, they've already come to the mayor indicating that they'll be looking for an additional 2.5 million.
Any additional questions?
Yes, this is Carolyn Dole.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, what does the state code say about schools' fund balances?
The school fund balances revert back to the localities unless there's provisions in the local code that calls for alternative means of handling it. Stanton's policy is to allow schools to retain their fund balance. That is not the practice in states.
Right, that's what I thought was the case, and so we have for quite some time allowed them to keep their fund balance.
I didn't catch all that, Ms. Dole.
Oh, I was saying that I thought that was the case with state code, but we have for some time allowed them to keep the fund balance.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And in reality, if the school system had some I can't even think of an example, some disaster happened where they needed more money to operate, who's responsible for that?
It probably all depends on the nature of the disaster and the locality that you're in. Some localities would just turn and say, make the cuts. Other localities would work with their school system. Stanton would work with their school system. I feel quite confident.
That would be my thought. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any?
Miss Mara,
Yes.
I'm sorry. One clarification to Mr. Trayer's statement to Counselor Dole. The fund balance that is the local portion of local dollars reverts back to the locality. It is important to note that if there are state funds left over, that the state, that part of the fund balance, the state would determine.
True.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Holmes?
Phil, how many positions have we eliminated over the last three years that we really need to replace?
Well, I believe we've eliminated 8 originally. We brought a couple of back. We added a couple positions, different positions this year. So we're at a -3, net -3.
Does that include Public Works? Because
That's public, yeah. Public Works is driving that for sure. Not included in that number is what we've done in water. We're in the hole, a couple positions in the water department, I believe, although we've closed that gap a little bit with this budget, but what we were presenting on was general fund.
some of the jobs that we need to replace in Public Works are much higher paying jobs, aren't they? Like,
Some are, yeah, some are. Yeah.
I personally am for helping out the school board as much as we possibly can. You know, I ran when on building the new high school, and I think if we got the money, we should give them what we can. But sometimes you got to think about other people in other departments and how much they have to cut. And I mean, the knife's been out the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So
I think we have a path. And moreover, I think conversations going forward with the new methodology is something that we really need to hammer out. I mean, it really is something that we're going to have both sides, not just one side. Both sides are going to have to give on this a little bit. What I think, as you could see tonight, we believe that the school's budget requests will be intact, although maybe not quite the path that school administration had initially envisioned. But I think once we get to talk with them a little bit, I think they'll see the path. And then going forward, if we can hammer out a new methodology, and I really like the idea, and actually school staff mentioned this to me a few months ago, and it didn't sink in, but after I spoke with the Waynesboro finance director, it just made a lot of sense. And that's where they use the most recent audited revenues. So there's no ambiguity, there's no subjectivity. It's produced by the auditors. If we were to baseline back FY20s, which means we would have to look at the most recent audited revenues as of the FY 2020 budget process, baseline it there and move forward. I think the schools will be happy, and I don't think we'll have the conflict that we've seen this year.
Counselor Darby, just making sure everybody's awake.
Phil, isn't Waynesboro using a 2-year average on that?
Well,
I heard about it at the
Maybe
school board
so.
meeting the other night for the first time, and it makes sense.
yeah,
That way
I
you
may
have an
stand corrected
average.
there, which is fine.
Revenue
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
It's actual revenue numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. that's
Instead
good.
of always going on anticipated number,
Yeah,
you have an actual number to deal with.
yeah, well, I mean, yes.
Good deal. This is a lot of numbers to take in.
Yep.
Absolutely. We're running over schedule, but
Well, this is Carolyn Dole. If I could just
Oh, yeah.
have one more shot at Phil Trayer. I just wanted to thank Mr. Trayer for doing a wonderful presentation, as did Ms. Beauregard. But it's really good to see the facts, you know, on black and white, and it's you know, it's factual. And I was also very, very encouraged by that slide that showed the path to reducing their request, the gap to 152 or whatever that figure was, because I believe Leslie when she says we can get there. So I'm very hopeful.
yeah,
Thank you, Ms.
thank you.
Dahl.
And
Thank you.
May I suggest,
Yeah.
since we're running behind, I think you can break until around 6:30 or 6:25. It's up to you. I think we have a little bit of cushion at the end of the meeting, so I'll leave that up to you, Madam Mayor, how you'd
Okay.
like to do that.
Yes, let's tack on 5 minutes to our break. But did you have something very quickly?
I just wanted to, personally thank Ms. Beauregard, Leslie, Phil Trayer, and his entire staff.
Yes.
I think we have an amazing staff that, like I said, when they blows your mind with all the numbers, but I think the training that they've got, you know, and all the schooling that they went to achieve what they do, Stanton is blessed. And I thank you very, very much.
Thank you
Yes.
both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate all the effort that you put into the presenting this budget and putting it together. All right, with that, the city council is now on break until 6:25.
Right. There's a lot of numbers.
I think we're going to hear that.
Okay, we are now back from break. It is 6:25. I'll give the council a chance to trickle on back in. Yeah, yeah.
Leslie.
Yes, ma'am.
Kylie get to eat.
Okay, I think we're all back. The next item is item number 3, a discussion about voting registrar space and storage needs. Ms. Beauregard.
Sure, I'll just quickly introduce this item before Mr. Long comes up to speak. So on January 28th, I actually did meet with the Electoral Board Chair, Mr. Thomas Long, and Molly Goldsmith, who's the registrar. And they talked to me about several concerns they had and opportunities to improve and make future elections more secure and welcoming to citizens. On March 5th, Councilmember Terry Holmes was contacted also as well regarding these issues, and he requested that this item be included on an agenda, which it is now. We are here. We're talking about this item tonight. Mr. Long is going to be speaking to you all for a few minutes about their concerns and needs, and I will now turn it over to him. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Leslie. My name's Tom Long. I'm Chair of the Electoral Board. Thank you for this opportunity very much. With me tonight is Molly Goldsmith, the registrar. Also, our Sheila Ahmadi, our vice chair, is with us. And Ann Fitzgerald could not be here tonight, but she is in full concurrence with what we are presenting. We discussed this twice in meetings and wanted to bring it to your attention. The good news is it doesn't involve this year's budget, but this is a longer term look at our needs in the election area. A few statistics before I dive into more specific things. Absentee and early voting, which starts 45 days before elections now, have become very popular in Stanton and all across Virginia. 2020 presidential elections, we had a 74% turnout here in the city of Stanton. That's 13,750 voters. And 6,286 of them voted early in the lobby here. That's a lot. And 3,347 voted by mail. That's a lot of ballots to process. In the 2021 gubernatorial election, we had 9,972 voters in the city of Stanton, about a 56% turnout. And even with that smaller turnout, we had 1,242 absentee ballots that Molly and her staff had to process in our central absentee precinct, and 3,242 voters voted early here in the lobby. So that leads me to, well, those things have led us to have some concerns. One concern that all of you have seen when you filed your candidate paperwork is that Molly's office is tiny. It's 188 square feet. When we're in the process of receiving, well, mailing out and then receiving back absentee ballots, which all have to be tracked very carefully for security and fraud prevention reasons, those ballots have to be processed. There are 4 types of absentee return envelopes. All of this material, ballots before they go out, ballots after they're received back, have to be securely stored and accessed and be able to be processed on a daily basis. When the ballots come back in, Molly and her staff sort them alphabetically by ward, and they have to be securely stored until Central Absentee Precinct processes them. Because of the secure storage of the ballots, she has to move a lot of stuff out of her office into this closet. And all sorts of other voter records and materials are also in that closet. That closet is also used, or will be, with 2 voting machines, right? Yeah. Yes. Will be used for some storage of voting machines, supplies for polling places, poll books, and more. She can't get in the office without taking things out of in the storage without taking things out first. That's one of our items, the size of Molly's office. Related closely to that is early voting in the lobby presents some issues. There's only room for 2 privacy booths, and many voters have had to use a clipboard because they want to vote and get on with their day. There's room for 1 poll book station. When lines get long, some voters come to Molly's office and go in to check in with her. That presents privacy concerns because other voters' materials, Social Security numbers, et cetera, could be on a computer screen or on a deputy registrar's desk and visible to the voter when they come in to register. Her staff increases from 2 to 6 during early voting. There's no room for absentee ballot processing, registration of new voters. It's very cramped when she has officers out in the lobby and up to 3 people in her office trying to work in that small space. Parties and candidates are allowed to have observers to elections, and they're allowed to have observers during the early voting period as well. It's very hard to accommodate multiple observers in the cramped space we've got. And observers cannot go into Molly's office because there is personal, private, secure information on desk and on computer screens. We are required to have curbside voting. The site we used last time was at the corner of West Beverly and Central. It is rather far away and inconvenient. Curbside voting requires officers to go out and help the voters at their car and several trips back and forth. Voter lines in the office, and I've been in there helping and seen it. The voter lines do impede other citizens coming in to transact business, particularly with the treasurer and Commissioner of Revenue. The main lobby doors are heavy, not particularly handicap accessible. We do know we have these doors, but a lot of people come in those front doors. The last 2 Saturdays before the election, I like having the downtown accessible to walking and so forth, but it's not particularly accessible to voting on those last 2 Saturdays when West Beverly Street's closed off for the other beneficial purposes. Voters, we have multiple voters who park on West Beverly Street with flashers on and come in the front doors and block traffic a little bit. So those 2 things are, those items are some of the items that are difficult with early voting. And finally, storage of our voting equipment, we must improve. Currently, voting machines and other supplies are stored at a different location that's not climate controlled, and it's not easily accessible by us as the Electoral Board or by Molly. There are things we have to do there from time to time, and it involves, for example, the accuracy testing that all voting machines have to go through prior to each election. We have to go in and maintain supplies, recharge batteries in the voting machines. They have battery backup and they need to, we don't leave them charging all year, but we need to charge them periodically. And so there's a need to have voting machines stored in a facility that's climate controlled, adjacent to the registrar's office, so that maximum security can be assured and maintenance of the machines can be assured, and that is climate controlled. So that these are expensive machines, as you know, council paid for them once upon a time a few years back, so that they are maintained in top quality condition. These are longer term goals, but we would hope that council, working with Leslie, working with other city departments and staff, and with Molly and the Electoral Board, can find some remedies by 2024 when we have the next presidential election. And I thank you.
Thank you.
I or Molly will try to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions?
Well, the biggest thing is, you know, is a lot of people are voting early, and COVID's here to stay. So a lot of people are going to do curbside voting. So we need to make it easy as we can for people to vote. And I've been in, I think we've all been in here when we had voting going on in the lobby, and it gets really crazy. And her office, I mean, that closet's probably bigger than her office. So I
That's
mean,
right.
it's just,
No doubt.
you know, she just got a window in it. That's the only difference, you know, so it
But
really,
thank God for the window.
but I think anything that we can do to put all this stuff in one spot would be better for all of us.
Right.
I'm just curious, Mr. Long and Molly, and have y'all identified maybe any additional space here in City Hall, or are you?
We have not, and that's part of the reason I wanted to put it out in front of the council. I think this is going to need to be a team effort involving the electoral board, city council, and city staff.
Any additional
But
questions?
just these machines are they're really susceptible to moisture and stuff like that. So they need to be somewhere where you can, which is it's controlled.
Climate control.
And we all know how important election security is to both parties and to everybody who's watching. And that involves not just the machines, but the ballots that we receive in advance of the election, the storage of those ballots, the storage of the received absentee ballots. All of those things have to be kept in very, very secure places. And in my mind, the best secure place is a really locked room that only the registrar has a key to, and adjacent to her office or his office, as the case may be.
And how many machines are we talking about?
We currently have 5 wards, so there's 5 that we take out to the polling places, and we have 2 that we'll be using here. We are required now to have 1 machine on which we count the absentee votes and a different machine on which we count the early votes.
Is that in addition to the other 7?
That's in addition to the 5 that we take out to the wards on election day.
So would you use, like if you had one here in the lobby, would that be used for the absentee?
Previously, we could count all of them on 1 machine, right? Absentee and early voting was counted as absentee basically, and they were all together. Now we have to have a separate machine for the early voting. That would be the one that's in the lobby. And there would be another machine that Molly would need to access when we start pre-processing absentee ballots, which is about a week before election day.
But you really need 2 early voting machines, don't you? Don't you need?
We have 2 right now. We have a spare. We obviously want to keep a spare. So we have 1 just to give early voting is the in-person one, and then there's the mailed.
But you've been just setting up 1 when you really could have 2.
Yeah, I mean, you can always do. I mean, if you're gonna give us money from our machines.
But a big concern to me with 2 machines wouldn't go in the lobby. We are pretty
Yeah,
Right,
it's too
especially
tight.
with
It's too
COVID.
pretty
crowded.
tight. We have 2 voting stations we put out there. The electronic poll book is right at Molly's door. And we usually have a couple of officers out in the lobby to direct traffic, to help voters if they have issue inserting the ballot in the machine or whatever. So, yeah.
All right, well, thank you
This
very
is
much.
Carol.
Carolyn?
This is Carolyn Dahl. I just want to say that nobody could deny that Molly's office is teeny tiny. And nothing you say seems out of reality. I mean, it's all true. I mean, when I hear it, I'm like, well, yes, all of that's a problem. I wish I could say I've got the perfect solution, but I don't. But I agree that we need to work together and try to find some reasonable improvement in the situation.
Yes, indeed. We'll figure this one out. So
Thank you.
thank
Appreciate
you
the
very
time.
much.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us on to item number 4, which is roll call. We are now at the portion of the agenda called roll call. Roll call allows each council member an opportunity to bring forth matters for staff follow-up, either during the same meeting or at a future work session or regular meeting, if additional time is required to respond to a council member's inquiry. All right, with that, I'll start with Counselor Holmes.
Nothing for me today.
All right, Counselor Darby.
Ms. Beauregard, can you give a a quick update on what the paving schedule might be?
So actually,
streets.
just today, I received an email from Mr. Johnson as a draft email that I'll be sending to you all, including a schedule. So you should expect to see that very soon.
And will that be, when it's finalized, will that be posted on the city webpage?
Yes, it will. Keep looking behind me. I know I'm looking at my experts back
I'm
here,
just
but it
looking
will,
at you.
correct. This whole area over here.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it will.
When
Yes.
does it typically start?
I'm going to let Jeff stand up and
Come on up
address
to the
this a little
podium,
bit.
Mr.
So
Johnston.
that's too technical for me.
Right? I mean.
Mhm.
So typically, we like to start paving after bulk trash pickup. So that's sort of the big event that signals the start of that season. Which as long as I'm up here, that will be the week starting the 4th of April. Have all your bulky trash to the curb by 7 a.m. on the 4th of April.
There you go.
However, this year we are going to try and get started next week. In meeting with our paving contractor, they've indicated that asphalt prices will only go up this summer. So the sooner we start, the more asphalt we can do early, the longer our paving dollars will go. So we will get a start, weather permitting. There's a little snow in the forecast for next week.
I know.
Weather permitting, we'll get started next week and move through the summer. And again, we'll get that paving plan to council and then get it out to the public as well. It is just a plan, not a schedule. Crazy things happen with weather. We will get to as many of those projects as we can. If we're lucky, we might be able to pick up 1 or 2 more. Maybe we won't quite get to them all, but the plan will be out very quickly.
Thank you.
Right, hopefully the paving trucks will be brought out rather than the snow trucks. So,
I was unaware it was an either or proposition, but yes,
Well,
if that's the case, I will
I saw
definitely pick the paving
I
trucks.
saw the forecast. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
All right, Vice Mayor Robertson.
I don't have anything right now.
All right, Counselor Claffey,
Nothing tonight.
Counselor Dole.
Nothing.
Right, and I have nothing as well. So that takes us to item number 5, a closed session for discussion of the award of a public contract for architectural services. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Mayor Oakes,
Counselor Holmes,
I move to enter a closed meeting for discussion of the award of a public contract for architectural services involving the expenditures of public funds where discussion in an open meeting would be adversely affect the public body's bargaining position or negotiating strategy pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2-2-3711A29.
all right, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll second that.
All right, Counselor Claffey has second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Kessler, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Claffey,
Aye.
Ms. Dahl,
Aye.
Ms. Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Oakes.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Right, we're now in closed session. I'm sorry, folks, I'm going to have to ask you to leave just for a little bit.
I move that council reconvene in an open meeting and certify to the best of each member's knowledge that only lawfully exempted public business matters were discussed and that only public business matters as identified in the closed meeting motion were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
A second. This is Terry Holmes.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion? And hearing none, Mr. Kessler, please call the roll.
Ms. Dahl,
Aye.
Ms. Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Oakes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Claffey.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. We're now back into an open meeting for the work session, and I call the work session adjourned, and we will be back for the regular meeting at 7:30.